Catherine from Bumpkin Hill, and I love flowers. I love growing flowers, painting flowers, and especially stitching flowers. So today I'm going to show you how I use long and short stitch to stitch flower petals like these little ones. For this particular flower I'm using long and short stitch, which gives it a really nice texture, as you can see. So get your needle and thread and let's get started. So when it comes to petals, I like to work one half of the petal first and then the other half, and that gives it a nice symmetrical look. So I've done my first stitch, which is a long stitch. I've simply come out and I start from the top of the petal and work my way down. So then you take your needle out the top of the flower and you do a stitch about half the length of the previous one, and then right alongside it you then do another long stitch, same length as your first stitch. You can work your way slightly into the centre rather than directly vertically down. And then I do a short stitch. And then again a long stitch, again slightly working in towards the centre. So this is the long stitch, and so it slightly comes over the area where the other stitch was. That makes sense. And so you gradually work your way until you've done your first layer. I'm now going to do short stitch, and then finally a long stitch. And you don't need to be very precise with this, it's very forgiving. So that's the first layer. So we're now going to start on the second row, still on this half of the petal. So we go back to the end of your first stitch, which was a long stitch. And for this particular flower, I like to bring the needle down to about here, which eventually gives the central part of the flower a really nice pattern to it. But if you wanted to, you could do a stitch straight down to the centre. So that's your first stitch. Now the second stitch is a bit harder to see because it was a short stitch, so it was up here, so you're actually coming back up a bit higher. But come down to the same point as your first one. And then the next one was a long stitch, so you just come to the end of where your previous stitch finished and you come down. And then you go up to your short stitch from before, so it's a bit higher up. And then again the long stitch. So you basically just keep working along like that all keeping up to the same section here, to the same level. So I'm just going to finish off this section and then I shall come back to you to show you what you do for this last little half here. So to finish off the first half of the petal, simply start again at the edge and come up where you finished your previous stitch and go nicely into the centre of the flower. And just work your way along like that, coming out from the end of the previous stitch and going back into the centre. So now I'm doing the final stitch of this half, and as you can see you get a nice little ridge where the stitches join together, and so when that works all the way around the flower, it gives rather a nice effect. So that's one half of a flower petal done. You now do the other half of that petal exactly the same, and then just work your way around the whole flower. So when you finish stitching it, you will end up with a flower like this. You could even use different coloured thread in the centre if you wanted to. So I wish you lots of fun with your embroidery, and if you also fancy stitching this particular design, then the pattern is available in my Etsy shop, and I will put all the details in the description.